Welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends. Well, as much as it drives Fuzzybutts all over this place absolutely crazy when they hear it, that I'm your host of this show, Yer Big Dog, Luke Robinson, and we're always glad to have back with us this week our co-host and co-pilot. She is the executive director of the Puppy Up Foundation, Ginger Morgan. Ginger, how are you this time?
I am doing well, and I'm really excited to jump into this topic today. I think it's near and dear to several of our hearts.
It is. It's a very important topic, and it is very near and dear to my heart because I'm not sure if our guest knows this, but one of my fuzzy butts, number 5, as a matter of fact, Grayson, just finished up heartworm treatment number 3, went through all 3 injections. And he was fostered, then we adopted him. And so we thought we had the whole heartworm issue under wraps before we started training. We're about to go on a 300-mile trek. But thank goodness we have a wonderful veterinarian, Dr. Heather Laros, here in Memphis, Tennessee. And she decided to do a more extensive testing. And the false negative turned out to be a positive. So the heartworms were not taken care of. So the slow dose treatment that we were using was not successful. So we went through treatment, but then what makes the story even that much worse is that Grayson, as some of you know, had such a bad reaction and ended up having to spend a night in the ER. So fortunately, Grayson is doing okay. He's recovered. He's on the mend. He's back in training now. So pet parents, moms and dads of Fuzzybutts everywhere, please listen to this episode all the way through because I'm so happy to have with us this episode. This veterinarian knows everything about heartworms. It's I hope so. He's Dr. Chris Duke. In addition to being a practicing veterinarian, he is also the president of the American Heartworm Society. So this would be the go-to guys. Dr. Duke, welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends. How are you?
Oh, wonderful. Glad to be here. We'll see if we can share some information, but I'm afraid you built me way up here. I always make it clear to people I'm a practitioner that deals with a lot of heartworm cases, but I don't know everything. I'm working on it.
You're in Mississippi, correct?
Yes, I'm on coastal Mississippi, right across the bridge from Biloxi.
Okay.
That's a beautiful part of the country.
There's a lot of heartworms.
Yeah, we do.
That is. Well, let's start out. We love practicing veterinarians. Grayson has a wonderful GP here in Memphis. So tell us about your practice, please.
Well, we have a group practice. There's 8 of us, 4 men and 4 women. We have a good time with each other as far as making the day fun. I personally have been in practice 39 years here in Ocean Springs and helped found the practice. And we've just grown and added people along the way. And some people ask me, is that all you do is talk about heartworms and do internal medicine? The answer is no. As a general practitioner, I do it all. Tuesday, I was doing all the general surgeries and dentistries, and you never know on an emergency basis. I may have to cut in and just do something at a moment's notice. But for example, this morning, I've seen everything from upset stomachs on dogs to respiratory infections on cats and everything in between.
That's what you get when you have Fuzzybutts, isn't it? You get everything from the tail to the snout, from the top to the bottom. And but we promise we'll keep you focused on one particular topic today. Because I'm not sure if you know it, I've had 3 Fuzzybutts that have had a whole host of problems, not to mention of which are cancer. So we've seen it all here, both between Ginger and myself. So how did you, so you have a thriving practice, it sounds like, in a wonderful, beautiful area of the country. So how did you, Dr. Duke, get interested in heartworms in particular?
Well, there's nothing like firsthand experience. So when the cases come to you all these years, you're kind of like, well, do you kind of pick it up as you go and become pretty good at it because you have to become good at it? And I always tell people that's my biggest credibility is that I may not be an academician and be highly published or anything like that, but if 39 years of practicing on the Gulf Coast means something, oh yes, I treat heartworms weekly here. Obviously, I do heartworm tests throughout the day. And like you were talking about Grayson there, I'm hoping I'm seeing just about all of them negative, but one sad takeaway soundbite that you'll have from this is that we unfortunately diagnose at least a case a day here. It's just that native to us. But yeah, how it came up with the Heartworm Society is I also used to write for the papers back when the newspapers were hungry for content and wanted the local veterinarians to write columns. And so I did. And of course, I would do a lot of dwell on a lot of cases that dealt with topics that were germane to our local pet population. So heartworms would come up now and then. And Steve Jones, who was president of the Heartworm Society, 2 presidents before me, read one of my articles and called me up and said, "We're looking for a practitioner board member. What would you think?" And I went, "I know about your organization, but what kind of time does it entail?" And he put my mind at ease and he goes, "Listen, it's mainly done by email most of the time. We have 2 meetings a year. You can handle it, but I'll be honest with you, I didn't think I'd be president 6 years later, but it just kind of evolved from there. And I obviously I learned a lot about heartworms and parasitology in veterinary school years ago, but I have learned a lot. I'm sorry about that speaker. I'll turn that down. But the problem with I say the good thing, not the problem, is that you pick up a lot of useful information along the way, listening to these very smart people on the Heartworm Society board.
Absolutely. So let's start off. You see one heartworm case a day at your practice. How common is it? What percentage of dogs or companion animals get heartworms in this country?
Luckily, and I credit this to a lot of good heartworm prevention products. We are, of the animals that come to see us, the dogs in particular, who we regularly test, we're only seeing that many, and it could be worse. I mean, you're only talking about 1% to 2% of your canine population here. That's good, and I credit that with the great products and compliance that clients have. Unfortunately, there's those that don't go to the veterinarian, that don't stay on a product, and that's frankly the biggest problem, because that becomes the groundswell of how other dogs can get infected from heartworms if they're not on prevention regularly.
Right. But that speaks also to the practitioners, to veterinarians as well, because to have that type of 1% to 2%, you get a lot of compliance from your patients. So congratulations. I thought it might be much, much higher. I would imagine it would be higher probably in the rural areas of the country.
I think a little bit so. I will say there's one other factor besides, who comes to the vet, who gives product. And you just kind of touched on it, and that is education. You have to make sure that that's a key component to every veterinary visit. We talk about their weight, their diet, heartworm and flea control products, because you just have to. If you don't bring it up, in my opinion, you're missing the boat. You've got to cover those bases with dog owners.
Yeah, most of our podcasts, because of our experiences, are focused on companion cancer, and so you cannot educate pet parents enough. So before we get into what exactly the heartworm is and every aspect of the worm up to the disease itself, give us an idea. So about 1% to 2% of the population, what is the death rate or the mortality rate? What percent of dogs actually pass away, would you say, from that?
Not many at all. I mean, we're talking probably only about 1% of that group that we see in our practice. Okay. I get asked about, obviously, when we diagnose a heartworm positive dog and we go through the scheduling and how we treat them for heartworms, we talk about the risk factor, and every client wants to know, do you ever have any that have adverse reactions or lose a patient? Knock on wood, it's been a long time. It's been years since I've lost a patient from heartworm complications. I really credit the Heartworm Society's guidelines for that, because every so often we update it with more of what's the more efficacious, safe information that we can implement into that. And by practitioners following those guidelines, we are having a lot less complications on heartworm cases than we ever have.
Well, those numbers really are impressive. So you certainly have done wonderful work there at the American Heartworm Society, and also educating there at the general practitioner level. So let's go ahead and just dig right into the parasite and the disease itself. So to start, however you want to kick this episode off, introduce us into heartworms.
Okay. Well, I always start with this when my clients first get awakened to the topic, and they'll say, well, in a nutshell, explain heartworms to me. And I'll say, okay, well, In a nutshell, you're asking me to explain one of the more complicated life cycles there are in the parasite world. You've got 5 life stages to talk about. Everything from the L1, which is the baby heartworm, the microfilaria, to the L5, which is the adult. I call them the mamas and daddies that make the babies. And then in between, you have life stages where part of it's on the mosquito and part of it's back in the dog. And so as you go from the, let's say the infective larva of L3, and let's say a dog doesn't have heartworm prevention in play, and it develops into an L4 and it's into the circulation, then you get beyond what heartworm prevention will stop. And you've got the L5s, which are the more destructive adult heartworms. They're the ones that are in the cardiopulmonary tissues doing the damage. And it's unfortunate that once it gets that far, you have to talk about killing the heartworms to reverse the disease process. But this disease process can be far reaching. It can affect everything from the stamina and the breathing of the dog, its energy level, its cardiac output. It can wreak havoc on both systems, cardio and pulmonary.
Yeah, we didn't get that exact number, but I'm fairly certain, Ginger, you can confirm or disconfirm this. My guess is Grayson was an L5 because he actually had heartworms that were visible at the via an echocardiogram.
Right.
Not a lot, but he certainly had some mild inflammation, and it was in the atrial valve in that area. But it was all, thank goodness, it was all minor. So like you said, and that's why we did the treatment. Once they get to L5, you have to do the treatment. Is that correct? To kill them.
Right. Right. There's no other way but to use active ingredient melarsamine. It's the only licensed product that will kill heartworms because, there's just nothing else licensed that can do it. And it's, I get asked from time to time, isn't that an arsenical product? It is, but it's a generation removed from the original arsenical, the coparacylate, which was the most damaging to the bodies of dogs. So it's gotten easier. It causes less tissue damage than the old product does. And we've had it since about the mid-90s, and it's been doing a good job for us. That's one thing that I've seen in my practice years improve is the safety and efficacy of that product in itself. And of course, resting the pet, as you know from Grayson's experience, you got to really rest them after those shots.
Right, we did, and thankfully he seems to. We've been slowly walking him, and we're almost, I think, up to a mile now, and so he's responding well. We're not seeing any sort of respiratory distress. We're going to do a follow-up echocardiogram probably about a month and a half before I go on this walk. But all indications is that he responded very favorably to the injection. He did have that one night in the ER, which we suspect maybe was one of the rare, it was vomiting, GI distress, but he recovered 100% from that. So thank goodness for that. But that we're jumping all around, but I like this. I tend to be fluid in how I approach my podcast. How we got here. So here's how we got here. And I want to talk about that. And I would want to do it kind of gently because I adopted Grayson from the National Great Pyrenees. It's a wonderful, wonderful organization. And he was heartworm positive when I fostered him. So we knew it 100% going in. His pet parents, which you probably couldn't describe him, that just took horrible care of him, and it cost him his leg. So he lost. So he's 3-legged. So I fell in love with him, and he told me that I was the best dad in the world, and I was the only dad for him in the world, and I believed him at the time. So
Yeah.
he sold me a bill of goods, and I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. And so, so he was on this. What we got him, they said that he was undergoing this slow dose treatment. Now, I need to back up a little bit, and this is not the first Pyrenees group or people that I've heard that, because on my travels, which have been extensive and going on for a long time, I've met many, many Pyrenees people that have said the same thing, that their Pyrenees seem predisposed or have a predilection to having an adverse event with whatever the common treatment is, and so they go the slow dose route. But obviously, clearly, the results speak for themselves that did not work. And so I'm not trying to speak ill on behalf of the net or towards the National Great Pyrenees at all whatsoever. I just want to, that's definitely a topic that I want to break down. And we're kind of at that point right now to talk about it. So are you familiar with that? Have you heard that before, the slow dose?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I have dogs going through it here in my practice as well.
Okay, good.
Now, let me start with the top, and that is, the gold standard is the melarsoline treatment or using the adulticide injections. There are three indications of where clients may not want to do that. One is a serious predisposed medical situation that's in play. I always tell people melarsoline and making sure the blood work, for example, before you go in for it, you probably had that done on Grayson as well. Make sure that you go with your eyes wide open, that the patient is otherwise healthy. Because let's face it, if they're a cancer patient or a diabetic or something like that, you might have a consideration of, whoa, hold the phone here, and so, yeah, that's one situation right there. And another situation that's just a reality is we talked about resting the pet. And I have some clients that say, you're talking about keeping my dog inside, basically resting, except for going out to a leash walk to go to the bathroom and coming back in. And I say, well, yes, that's the level of rest I'm talking about, literally after each adulticide shot. So that's a commitment we have to have, because I think that especially a veterinarian like me, who's been at it 39 years and had adverse events, you feel like you've got blood on your hands if you've talked them into an adulticide treatment, but they suddenly collapse in the yard after they've run around on a hot summer day like today. So yeah, you got to have rest as a requirement. And if clients cannot guarantee me that they can rest them a month at a time after these injections, I say, let's don't do it. Do the doxycycline for the month. I'm sure you went through that with Grayson.
We did.
Yep, do doxycycline in advance and then come back and make sure that you're on one of the products. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, a little bit later on which products are better for which patients and so forth. But yeah, that's the second category I want to touch on, though, is if you can't rest them, I'd rather say the client and I have agreed that we're going to slow kill it for now unless things change. But if they do, let me know. And the third one's a reality, and that is cost. I tell people I wish melarsoline were cheaper. And I have to excuse when I give estimates on heartworm treatments when people either shop it around or I diagnose it in here, and I'll say, I'm sorry, melarsoline doesn't grow on trees, and I wish I could do these cheaper, but the drug is expensive. It doesn't matter. There's two companies that make it, and both companies charge about the same thing for it. So it's just a hard reality that people have to pay for it. And not that I require payment all of it up front. We stage it as we go. But yeah, that's just a reality. I have clients that stop me right there when I go through the Heartworm Society schedule and say, here's the checkpoints where we need to do this or do that and check in with you. And they'll say, well, can you give me a cost estimate every step of the way? And I do. And they go, Doc, we just can't go for this. And I'll say, well, slow kill is a risk in itself too, which I'll get into in a minute. But it's a viable reason why some clients just don't go forward, and we keep them in slow kill.
We live in a world of limited resources. It's just a reality. We all know that.
We do. And with the Great Pyrenees, that's a large dog dosing, and that's a reality too. The larger the dog, the larger the dose of melarsoline you have to use. So
but is it true? I didn't hear in that list, I think you listed 3. I didn't hear predilection. Is it true that there are some breeds that are predisposed to a sensitivity to the I didn't memorize the chemical name, to the injections?
Right. Melarsoline. I am not aware of one breed being singled out as having problems on that.
Okay.
On some prevention products, the MDR1 gene that affects some breeds, there is some sensitivity on those. Although the manufacturers have told me that they've titrated the doses down low enough where it's effective against the heartworms in just about all cases without threatening those dogs that have a genetic predisposition or sensitivity to the 3 primary groups of drugs that we use as preventions.
So there's definitely a valid reason to go the slow dose routes. There's certain established science behind that, which is a great thing. That's good to hear. And there's definitely good reason in certain cases. But do we know, Chris, what's the success rate of the slow dose? Is it different or substantially different from that of the melarsoline? Did I get that right?
Yeah, 2 main things to talk about when you go slow kill lane versus going melarsoline and trying to just give the injections and kill them off. or fast kill, if you want to call it that. There is damage. I told you I'd circle back to this, but there is damage that goes on when these heartworms, these adult heartworms, are not dealt with. They continue to do damage month after month when you're on slow kill. And that's a reality. What slow kill is to get rid of the adult worms is nothing but waiting for them by attrition. True, if you do the doxycycline up front, I always say, if you choose this lane, please do your doxycycline the first month, because the doxycycline does three wonderful things. It helps as a microfilaricide. It helps kill those babies, keeps them from being available for transport by the mosquitoes. It also shrinks the biomass of the female worms, which in turn makes their uterus very small where they can't reproduce as much. So doxycycline is really key. But even if you've done that, you still have the L5s that we've talked about, the adult worms that we're still not chipping away at. So the other problem, besides the adult worms continue to do damage if you do the slow kill, is the fact that you're not going to see them clear within the next blood check period like you would after a melarsoline treatment. I've been strung out year to year on these. I've been asked by clients, well, are they going to be cleared another year after that? And I'll say, well, I hope so, but every case is different. It's a numbers game. If you can decrease the number with the doxycycline of potential new worms and have the male and female adult worms not reproduce as many, sure, we're going to cut that down, but we're still waiting for those L5s to die by attrition. I've been strung out on a slow kill as long as 4 years before.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And that kills me because this particular person wanted her dog to be an assistance dog in a nursing home. And for some reason, the nursing home would not let her do that until the dog was heartworm negative. And I said, give me the number of someone to talk to there and let me tell them how this works. It's no danger to your human patients, et cetera, et cetera. And it didn't make a difference. They said, I'm sorry, rules are rules. But she was afraid to put this dog through a melarsoline treatment because she was just scared of what she had read online. And I kept on trying to persuade her, saying, we can clear your dog faster if we can step this up. But she never would get out of the slow kill lane. And I'm afraid it took a 4th year to get that one cleared.
Well, let's direct the next topic of discussion towards that caretaker in particular. So how do dogs catch heartworms, to answer that question? Obviously not that way. They're not that communicable that way.
Right. The short answer is mosquito bites. When mosquitoes get on and light on a dog's skin and take a blood meal, I always tell clients, they're not just making a withdrawal, they're making a deposit. Think about it. And I didn't conceptualize this when I was in veterinary school taking parasitology, but when you think about it, when they put their proboscis in that dog's skin and opening up that skin so that blood pools out, they are able to get their blood meal. And if the dog's heartworm negative, great. But if they're heartworm positive, here you go propagating it again, right? And here's the bad part. In that same blood meal, they're injecting heartworm larvae, the L3s, if you will, from their proboscis into the system. So it's working both ways. And I always thought there was a 1-to-1 ratio in my simplistic mind in veterinary school, thinking, okay, we got a heartworm, a mosquito that does carry the heartworm larva. It's one. The researchers, like at University at Georgia that I've spoken to, say, oh, no, they can have 4 or 5 in that proboscis. And that really ups the odds for infection, especially in the Southeast, where you've got a lot of mosquitoes, a lot of heat and humidity, and unfortunately, some unprotected dogs that allow this to keep on propagating.
But is there dog-to-dog transmission in any way, shape, or form?
No direct transmission. You have to have the vector of the mosquito as your intermediary.
Okay. What about ingesting, or is it always via blood?
It's always by blood. I get asked that question sometimes. What if you've got mosquito-laden food bowls?
Right.
Which, yeah, standing water here in the Southeast, absolutely. But you have to have the mosquito as your vector to do it through the blood, through the systemic. Don't know of any cases of ingesting mosquitoes and them developing from the GI tract. They have to get into that blood system. What they do is they get into the capillary beds under the skin, and then over the next few months develop that L4 into an immature L5. And once again, you get past what prevention will cover by that time. And then it's just a matter of how big these L5s can grow. Some females can be a full foot long. Males are a little thinner and smaller. They tend to be, 8-9 inches and thinner, but the females, they wreak a lot of havoc in the system because they're the bigger ones that do more damage.
That's there's a joke there somewhere. I'm going to bring up on our screen here while you're talking about the geographic distribution. Can you talk about that right now as I try to bring that up so we can look at that? Here we go. I think. Can you see that right there? That you have this wonderful infographic from your website, the American Heartworm Society, that I just brought up here. It's about the geographic distribution of heartworm incidents. So can you talk about that to our guests or our audience?
Absolutely. This is updated every 3 years, and we're about to have our next symposium in New Orleans in September. So we're coming right up on the next one. So we usually do the updated incidents report on the heels of the symposium. So you're about to get an updated one. But yeah, this is your 2019. And there's the obvious southeast infiltration, Texas across to Florida, up the Mississippi to southern Illinois, and then over to the Carolinas, southern Virginia on the eastern border there. And so, yes, that's the dark red in places where the incidences are the highest in the veterinary clinics. And this is according to reported diagnosed cases by veterinary clinics that are participating. One thing you'll notice beyond that, though, is there is some shaded area in every state. All 50 states have had cases reported. And I think that there's certain reasons for this. I think that if you go back on these incidence maps, 20, 25 years, you don't see this much area covered. But two factors that I have always explained is that people and dogs are transient right now. You will have people that have dogs that may be in the southeast that may be heartworm positive, and they can go to another mosquito-laden area. And remember, mosquitoes in a lot of places most of the year right now, and have these that can introduce non-native cases to where you didn't have a lot of heartworms before. So that's one reason, is transiency of the people and the transiency of the dogs with them, once again, that may not be protected by prevention. And that's a battle we're seeing a lot of right now, is trying to educate people that know it doesn't matter if you're not, let's say, where I am on the Mississippi Gulf Coast or coastal Texas or South Carolina, for example. You don't have to be in these highly endemic areas to protect dogs. You need year-round prevention all over the continental U.S. here, because of the fact that, yes, there's active cases for those reasons everywhere now.
Yeah, for those that are listening to this podcast on the podcast platforms such as iHeartRadio or Spotify, there is, to underscore what Chris just said, there are 0 states in which there are no incidences of heartworm. So as he just said, there's that was going to be, you just answered my next question. Is there any reason in the United States, all 50 states, to not give your I guess your companions? We haven't even gotten into the dogs versus the cats yet, but let's just call them companion animals. Is there any reason not to give your companion animals heartworm prevention in any of the 50 states? Because I don't see Alaska on here.
Right. And I think in southern Alaska, they are documenting cases. They're not so much in northern Alaska, but in the thinner area down there, they do. Right. The thing about prevention, if you look at the not only medical risk, but the financial, I guess, statistics on this, you're doing it not only to prevent a very serious, possibly life-threatening disease on these dogs, but you also have, if you weigh the money of treatment that we've talked about and how expensive and risky that is versus prevention, it's a drop in the bucket. And so why don't we take advantage of these easy to give preventions that are very effective? They're safe. They're around 99% plus effective against heartworms. No reason not to. I'd say if anybody's on the fence, go ahead and commit to it.
I agree 100%. You sold me. Of course, I was sold well before this show even began.
Years ago, a lot of people, and maybe they still do, and it's just not people that I talk to, but they would give their dogs treatment, heartworm prevention, during the spring and summer months, but then fall and winter, they would stop. And to your point, people were saying, why do you do it year round, Ginger? I'm like, well, first off, I have to take my dog back in to the veterinarian to get the test. So having for the vet visit and the test, it's the same amount of money as if I gave my dog that the heartworm prevention for the other 6 months. It made no sense to me why people would stop.
Right, that is so true. And you'd be surprised where mosquitoes do survive. Urban hotspots, for example, where it does get freezing and there is snow precipitation, how mosquitoes still can survive in nooks and crannies where they find ways to adapt. How many of us have mosquitoes that get into our homes? And it's not always June through September. It's other times of the year. I think that the one thing about mosquitoes, they've caused a lot of lives in a lot of creatures, including human beings over the years, but they've also become so destructive because they are so adaptive. And, I won't get into the global warming climate change thing, but there are, at least recently, milder winters, which has unfortunately allowed for longer mosquito seasons. I was fortunate enough to be over in Europe last month, and I do talk trade over there a little bit with some of the medical professionals and veterinarians I run into, and they're very matter of fact about how far north in Europe heartworm disease is advancing there even nowadays. So there is something to the fact that we're having longer mosquito seasons as well.
It's very interesting, Ginger. I'm so glad you brought that up, because when I moved from Texas to Boston, I recall several people saying, well, it's the winter here in Boston. You don't really need no mosquitoes. You don't need to give heartworm medicine. And being from Texas, we don't have winter. There's nowhere that we have winter I think mosquitoes all year round in every parts of Texas. But I recall thinking that was strange, that logic. But my next question, Dr. Duke, is we now know we've 100% established that everywhere in the continental United States, save maybe for northern Alaska, you need to be giving heartworm prevention. But at what point in a dog or a cat's life do you begin that prevention? Do you start prevention?
Okay, we start them as puppies and kittens, and I know we haven't delved into cats yet, but let me just say this about cats. Cats can get heartworms, and they can get them the same way dogs do from mosquitoes. But a couple of things mechanically happen different in the life cycle development on cats. Number one is cats don't seem to carry microfilaria. Their immune systems kind of zap them out after a while. And so when you pull blood from a cat and go looking for the baby heartworms, most of the time you're not going to find them. You're real lucky. What few times I've caught them, I'm very lucky to catch them. Another thing on cats is that, contrary to your Great Pyrenees that may have a heart that's about like that, your cat heart is about like this, right? So it doesn't take but one or two worms in a cat, if they do catch them, to be fatal. And so being that I always start with these three simple concepts on cats. Cats are difficult to diagnose. That's another problem. We have testing issues on cats. What is an antibody test? What's an antigen test? About a third of the time, one of them might be accurate. That's not too good. So they're difficult to diagnose. They're impossible to treat. There's no licensed product to kill heartworms in cats. You would kill the cat trying. I hate to say it, but you would. And number three is, here's the good news. They're easy to prevent. We have these easy to prevent drops you put on the back of a cat's shoulder once a month. And they do a wonderful job, not only against the worms and heartworms, but against fleas, so forth, as well. So they're multimodal products that are very, very effective. But no, cats read a different book than dogs do. They're what you call an aberrant or a dead-end host, if you will. The good news is without the microfilaria, they're not a loaded gun to equip the mosquito to infect other cats nearly as much. That's a problem you have in dogs. It's quite universal. But yeah, in cats, you've got some different ground rules, but it's still worth prevention, especially, I used to say in outdoor cats, but, I've got a cat that he loves to sit in our lap, but he loves to go out and chase frogs and drag home, like we've got these big lobber grasshoppers out right now, and drag one in just to say, hey, for the sport of it. My cat needs prevention, so I put it on the first of every month.
Just as a side note, my fourth Pyrenees, Fuzzybutt number 4, he has a heart this size. Fuzzybutt number 5, his heart is this size. So Pyrenees come with hearts of different sizes. I just wanted, you might not know that as a veterinarian, but I just, being a Pyrenees expert myself. So can you be a little bit more specific, Chris, and tell us specifically in dogs, since that it seems like that they're afflicted at a much greater, they're a much greater risk for heartworms. So you said puppies. So is there an age, or does that vary given the breed size or size?
Yes, and you touched on a big one there, because if you're going to start a Chihuahua puppy on a puppy visit, it's going to be a different experience than starting a Great Pyrenees, isn't it? Because you're going to have maybe a 12-week-old Chihuahua that's only 2 pounds that came in 1.2 pounds on its first visit, but your Great Pyrenees came in for its first visit at 12 pounds and it's already 30, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah. Right. So what we do to accommodate that is say, well, we have starter pill packs that we can do. Our drug manufacturers are always kind enough to provide us with samples like on the first visit. And when we come in like at 6 or 7 weeks of age, a lot of times we'll sample a heartworm pill and say, well, pills are good while they're puppies because they're scalable. We can always go up and double the same pill until we get the next size up and then do the next size up. Another reason we get used to doing pills on puppy visits is because the injections that are available, you can't do those until they're grown up later. Part of the reason is, if you think about it, if you give the active ingredient in an injectable shot while the dog's at this size, but they grow to this size, the active ingredient doesn't keep up while they grow. That's why, for example, on ProHeart 12, they ask don't do it until they're a year of age. But it does point out that we have 3 viable ways that we've just talked about that we can protect pets. We can do the injectable mode, the tablet mode, which, to answer your question directly, I always start regular monthly dosing at the 9-week of age visit in dogs. And then on kitten visits, we do the same thing starting at their first visit as well, and sample them usually a topical, and then make sure they're maintaining on it on the booster visit.
So basically, when you adopt your new puppy,
Right.
then when you first bring it to the house and you schedule your first vet visit, that's the time to have the discussion about when to start heartworm prevention, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of practices are like ours, where they have a puppy kit, if you will, with a little puppy booklet with an outline of, I call it at my bus stops, every bus stop along the way, the first year, here's what we do, healthcare plan, if you want to call it that. And yeah, we actually walk them through that and show them what they can anticipate in their next visit and so forth as well.
Well, you just spoke about the different delivery mechanisms of heartworm prevention. Can you speak about the different brands? Because last time I checked it, there are a lot of them out there. And pet parents, I'm sure, as you can imagine, you really can't trust information that you get online. And you hope that your GP, your vet, is up to date and about what are the best products. So can you give pet parents a good idea of some of the good brands to look for, and/or maybe some of the ones that aren't as effective?
Sure. You're asking me the $1 million question. I get it. Doc, what's the best heartworm prevention product? Well, that all depends on their lifestyle. And we've talked about 3 modalities already, which is great. I mean, some people like the convenience of, I don't want to be bothered with it, give them a shot. And I have other clients that say, oh, my pets love the pills. Personally, my Labradors that I have at home, they love the pills. I haven't changed them off because they're very food and treat motivated. What can I say? So, that matters. But, part of what you've introduced here is that, sure, there's those things, but there's combination products now too. There's a lot of for example, the Empirical trio that Zoetis came out with in the last couple of years. It's all 4 things in one pill. It's fleas, ticks, worms, and heartworm prevention all in one pill. I have other clients that say, well, I don't need tick prevention. I just need worm and heartworm prevention. Well, great. Traditional, your ivermectin-based products like HeartGuard Plus are good. And I also get asked about, well, what about the active ingredient? I've heard there's 3 of them. There's 3 effective molecules in heartworm prevention. There's the ivermectin class that does the ivermectin-based drugs. There's the moxidectin, which is active in the newer drugs that has come out there. And there's milbemycin, which has been proven as a good month-to-month prevention in pill form as well. So I guess what it boils down to is, do you have an indoor pet that maybe is a couch potato that's at low risk against other parasites? Or do you want to get total protection, everything out as far as fleas and ticks as well? That's what a lot of my discussions center on.
I've traveled quite a bit, and Ginger and I are both very well connected with pretty much the higher ups in the veterinary oncology community. And I've spoken to just a ton of oncologists and veterinarians on my travels, always asking it about what are the major risk factors of cancer that we're seeing in dogs right now. And I know on the top of the list are vaccines, but I also hear on the list or like these multi vaccinations, so my question to you, how long have we been testing these prevention products? Are we seeing any risks or increase of risks in cancers? And if so, what types of cancers?
I frankly haven't seen or heard about any links between the prevention products and cancers. We talked earlier about the MGR1 gene, and perhaps that's something that I think we've put aside as a non-concern, except in real sensitivity cases we can document. But I don't know, and I'm being very honest here, about any bone, pulmonary, kidney, ovarian, type of cancer linked to any of these prevention molecules. Certainly I always tell this, and we at the beginning of our interview, you said he knows everything about heartworms. No, I don't know everything. And what do they say? The beginning of your wisdom is realizing I'm starting to scratch the surface, and there could be information that does come to light. We'll just have to keep our eyes open to it. But in discussions I've had with manufacturers, these are very safe products that have not caused any side effects that have been linked with cancer.
Well, I have to see if I remember. I usually almost always listen to the entire podcast prior to dropping it so I can go back and review my notes, and I do an extensive write-up. And so I'll see if I can find anything in the literature and maybe kind of talk to some of my go-to people in the veterinary oncology world. I guess the big question is that the prevention has been around for a while. So it's not like these are new on the market. So they've been used in dogs for some time. How long have they been used in dogs? Do we know?
Well, if you want to go back to the Stone Age, we had things like styrene and diethylcarbamazine back in the 70s. And I believe it was 1985 that we had the first monthly HeartGuard pill. Those previous pills were daily, if you can believe that.
I remember that.
Yeah. Malaria bits when diethylcarbamazine finally got a flavoring to it. And when HeartGuard Plus came out in 1985, we were kind of like, whoa, the world has changed. And isn't it something to think that, yeah, you've got that, but now you've got something that lasts as long as a year now. I have never seen any. Now, I will back off and say there's been some adverse reactions to certain products, just like human drugs. When you think it's related to it, because it's more than coincidence that it happened the first time and then the subsequent month, oh my gosh, it was the same day after we gave that product again. Yeah, you may want to seek an alternative. But the most side effects, frankly, that I have seen on a lot of these monthly products are maybe nausea, indigestion type problems, but nothing, frankly, beyond that.
Are there any brands? I don't want to get you in trouble, because I know veterinarians are typically very careful about promoting specific brands. And so, are there? How would you approach that? Are there brands that you recommend, or brands that you certainly think that just aren't as effective as others?
When I earlier stated that we've got a 99% or so track record, there is occasional resistance that we'll find. And what we have found is a pretty good level of efficacy of all the groups that we've talked about. And if I were to not get too brand specific, but say that of all three molecules, are we seeing one that's just the one that seems to have the least resistance of the subclass? I would say the moxidectin, the newer moxidectin-based products, probably. But in saying that, the ivermectin-based products, you heard me earlier, I still give them to my dogs because they still love monthly pills. And milbemycin, like for example, the Inter Plus and the Sentinel product that a lot of people like to get the the flea birth control element into play. They're solid products. So I really can't put down any of them. There's a lot of good products out there.
Good. So there aren't any out there that are that you feel like are that are less effective or that consumers should avoid. Pet parents.
No, not really. The important thing is to get on one, meet with your veterinarian, and during that health consultation say, now I've heard that I need to get on one. What do you suggest, doctor? And is there a reasoning that you like this one over that one? Or you have the open book policy like I do. Let's talk about the lifestyle of your dog. And do you want the flea or tick control with it? And let's let that dictate the terms.
Ginger, do you have a question?
I do. So are there any preventions that the heartworms become kind of immune to?
The resistance question.
Yeah.
That has happened occasionally on different products under the prevention umbrella. And it's really funny how I've on the upside said, by and large, the classes of products have done a great job of protection. By the same token, by and large, you can't aim at one product and say that one's always the one. There's been reports on, to my knowledge, on just about all of them as far as what they call them LOE, a suspected lack of efficacy. But I will say this, when I get a surprise heartworm positive here, the family's in, it's Saturday morning at 10 o'clock and we're just rocking right along and I've had nothing but puppy kisses and, waving the magic wand, get better with my antibiotics, and then all of a sudden the showstopper happens and you have the perfectly happy asymptomatic dog that you have to say, I'm sorry, your dog's heartworm positive on this antigen test. How did that happen? What's the first question I ask? Have you been missing doses? Have you gotten off the program for a while? And I will say this, about 80 to 90% of the time, they do admit it. Yes. And we know that's dangerous here on the Gulf Coast, but, we went through a rough spot financially, or we just lost track for a while and didn't come in for a long time because we were busy. During the pandemic, that seemed to happen. We got behind on our visits, but, we've caught up now, thank goodness. But yeah, those things happen. But frankly, non-compliance is number one. And luckily, most of my clients admit it when it does happen that way. Another thing that does when you're rocking along on your appointment schedule and you get that heartworm positive, it's kind of like, whoa, stop the presses. Can't just say, well, pat them on the back and get back on your prevention. We have to have the whole talk, start to finish, about what do we do now? And so that's what I'm saying. It's kind of like, yep, that's where you have to stop the presses and say, no, it's a whole different talk now.
Yeah. So I have kind of another observation, maybe question. I used to run the Humane Society here in Memphis. And so we would test the dogs when they came in to the Humane Society and they would be negative. And then the dog gets adopted. And at the Humane Society, we kept them for a long time. So
Right.
The dog would get adopted. And then when they take the dog to their veterinarian, it tests positive. So what I did for any dog that was at the Humane Society for more than 6 months, we tested them again at 6 months. But why, for the people listening and watching, so why would that happen?
Well, a couple of reasons. And I'm not going to get into sensitivity of this test versus that test, because whether you use one of the reference labs, IDEX, Antech, some of the others out there, HESCA has a test that's out there too. They're all pretty much ELISA-based tests that have either the blue dot or the straight line that you get, much like a pregnancy test or a COVID test right now. So using that same type of technology in most cases. But I think the bigger issue is what you just mentioned, and that is and it's not the shelter's fault. No, not at all, that you get a negative test. I truly believe it, and I truly believe it's as valid as what we would do here in practice. But here's something to consider. When you're getting a positive test, that is positive mainly to female adult worms that are giving off what can be the colorimetric antigen. In other words, to mix with that reagent and come up on that test is positive, you have to have that adult worm, that mature L5, to do so. Okay, you can test for microfilariae. You can pull a blood sample and put some fresh blood on a slide or filter it either way, and you can see little wigglers if you got L1. But L2 through early L5, there's no testing. You have a 5-month at least dark period where there's no diagnostics that can pick it up. That, when a shelter does test a dog and it's got an unknown background, that it is suggested that you retest in 6 months because you had some, let's say, some late L4s, some early L5s, but they didn't mature until when the test would pick it up until a later time. That's the major reason that happened. And I'll bet you you had some of those that you went back on 6 months later that did turn positive.
We did. I know I got a lot of resistance because, well, we have a lot of we had a lot of dogs there. So there was a cost. And I was like, but I think if we're going to adopt them out, they need to know. And we even started telling people that, they may test positive. If they do, bring them to us and we would help them with, the treatment, if they were adopted between that 1 and 6 months before we retested them. But I did not want to be right. But when we got, like 3 or 4 after 6 months, they were like, oh, I guess we do need to test all of them. I was like, yeah, because it doesn't show up. They could have been infected the day before we got them.
Right.
We don't know, but because with the Humane Society, you don't know.
Right.
So to repeat, for bad parents like me, because I am the offender that you were just speaking of minutes ago. Most people think I'm this great dog dad because that's just how that's not at all true. I'm bad big dog is probably more like it. And so sometimes, Chris, I can go like a really, it's just remembering anything on a monthly schedule, and I can go a week and just, oh my gosh, I'm behind a week. So my question, the question for pet parents that aren't non-compliant but just forgetful and have a hard time of keeping on the schedule, how frequently does your dog need to be tested? And then when you mess up like I do, when is the right time that you go, okay, I screwed up, I need to have them retested?
Right. I will say this, a couple of axioms here, and I always tell clients when they're in a phone conversation with me, for example, and say, well, Dr. Duke, I fell off my prevention a couple of months ago and I just quit giving it. And I'll say, don't do that. Get right back on the bike and keep giving it, because you don't want to keep that door open for 2 months, 3 months when you could have closed it after 1 month or less when you realized it. So that's one axiom, is get right back on as soon as you can. I don't have to retest dogs unless a client's been delinquent over 3 months off the prevention. That's usually about the gap where more than half the dogs will seroconvert in our climate. And that's always been a policy here, and the American Heartworm Society is pretty much backing that as well. The other thing you ask about annual testing, I get asked why the annual testing. Well, we touched on one reason already, and that is either from non-compliance or shadowing, or should I say, I call it ghosting. We ghost the background and didn't know what the dog had, and we're testing it again. Here's another reason. If you do find that they're positive, you want to realize as soon in the disease process as you can before it gets worse. And this is big too. Manufacturer's warranties. If you faithfully have a purchase record and you've been giving it and the dog seroconverts to heartworm positive, those are reportable cases that we are armed to go back with our manufacturers and say, wait, this is a non-compliance. The client claims they've given it. I know them. They are very good people that have done it, and look at their purchase record. They've got it, and they will a lot of times pay for your treatment if you report it. So for the warranty for the manufacturer, that's another big reason.
Well, how much does it cost? Because it seems to me, from my recollection, it's just a blood test. So definitely get tested, but cost shouldn't be a hurdle or a reason for not getting tested, right? It's not that expensive, correct?
No, it's not. What we do is we build it into our annual exam fee for dogs. That includes the basic vaccines, a parasite check for the bowels, and for the heartworm check. So that way it's everything in the package is discounted, so you get a good deal for it.
Yeah.
It's tremendously discounted as opposed to a diagnostic test that we're suspecting pulmonary disease and ruling out heartworms. Or if you do your visit a la carte, as I call it, where you say, well, I don't want this, but I want that. So just do, let's say, a rabies and a heartworm test today. Well, we charge out the piecemeal thing if we don't get the full package done. But we try to make the pricing of the annual package attractive to say, let's just do it all today at one time.
And that annual package, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's the annual package is probably in the majority of cases covered by insurance, I would imagine, right?
Depends on your insurance company and the policy you buy. I know, for example, I'm most familiar with Nationwide, the VPI formerly plan, where you get 3 tiers of level, you know, your silver, gold, platinum level, and so forth. Well, it will cover your routine health prevention visits. However, I do have some insured pets that just buy the most basic accident and hospitalization type insurance that doesn't. And the same thing goes for heartworm, you know, the heartworm prevention products as well. Just depends on the tier of product that you bought. Frankly, I still have a lot of clients that are not on insurance that just pay as they go. And that's fine, as long as we communicate to each other that, hey, there's a budget or limitation, tell me what it is. I already had 2 clients this morning tell me that, you know, be sure that you tell me what this will cost in advance, because I only have X that I can go to at this point. And that's great. I mean, we're happy to do that.
Well, in this case, to use a tired and oft-used adage, an ounce of prevention, or in this case, a couple of $100 a year in prevention, certainly prevents thousands of dollars for the treatment that Grayson has gone through, and a night in the ER. And I know right now we are talking to Nationwide about what's covered in that and what they're going to cover, because he was heartworm positive. So for me, whether your insurance covers the annual test or not, and the prevention it provides for the prevention, it doesn't come even close to the total cost of what we just went through. For all of those reasons, it makes sense. I'm kind of going through the list and making sure I cover everything. This has been so wonderful. You've been replete with so much information and knowledge. You've truly been a wellspring, and I've learned a lot. I have. And I knew a lot of this to begin with. But I had one silly question I just noticed I didn't ask. Do humans get heartworms? And if they don't, why not?
Well, it's really not too far off from our cat discussion, where they're dead end hosts. And I always heard in the early years, before we had better testing, that only immune suppressed people in certain areas of the country got it. And it is true that usually there's some blip in the immune system that allows for it, because naturally speaking, as compared to, let's say, the family Canidae we've talked about, dogs, wolves, coyotes, that family, they're the ones most prone to it because the immune systems allow for the development of it. Our systems don't, for the most part, and that's a really good thing. But the worst of all worlds is if you're in a very endemic area like we are here on the Gulf South. You have an immune compromised person, and yes, a good amount of mosquito bites. It can happen, but my understanding is, rather than causing the cardiopulmonary disease, the doctors tell me that no, what they tend to do is cause pulmonary nodules. But the live heartworms are not teeming in there. They kind of wall off and die in these pulmonary nodules. So the answer is yes, it can happen. They're isolated cases. They're not common, but when they do happen, yeah, we're a dead end host as well on that one.
Very fascinating. And one other question I think that I know the answer to, but I'm curious, is that if a dog gets heartworms, can they get it again? And my thinking is yes, because it's not like a virus where you build up an immune response, a secondary response. It's totally different.
Yeah, absolutely, Luke. If you asked me if you had the same dog turn heartworm positive twice in its life, yes. Because if you don't get rid of the problem, test it and verify it negative, and then stay on prevention, you're opening a door for, yes, it can happen again. Because if you've got the same endemic area, same mosquito population, sure. So that's just more evangelism of, hey, you've got to protect these dogs.
I was 98% certain of that question, but it's an important one to ask, because you never know who knows what, and that's a good question to ask. That's a good way to, I guess, wrap up this episode. Is that as we spoke earlier, is that prevention begins very young at the puppy stage, and is for the lifetime of the puppy, correct? Of the dog, correct?
Absolutely. And You know what you said about being human and not remembering every month if you're on a monthly product. This phone that I'm working through right now with you, we have our reminders. In my case, I use Google Reminders. I'm reminded about our meeting today because of Google Reminders, but I put on the first of every month just to cue the pet maintenance at 9 in the morning on the first of every month. And that way I give my dogs their product and I give my cat his product and we're done for the month. And for those that say, well, I maybe not that tech savvy or I don't want to put one more thing on my phone, the drug companies that manufacture the stuff, all of them will help you with that too. They'll call or text you if you want to. So they're all in your pet's best interest. We're all trying to keep you on track.
That's good to know. You know, it really is wonderful that you mentioned that the manufacturers are willing to text or somehow email remind you that this is the day to give. We'll need to, I'm certainly going to look into that and put that in the show notes because that's wonderful that they do, because it's something that's so avoidable, and it was so traumatic for me to go through with Grayson that I felt compelled that even though we do talk a lot about cancer in our Fuzzybutts, but I just felt compelled to share the story and to get to the root of it, to find out exactly what we're looking at, what we need to do to address it, how do we, and once we have the problem, once we get the diagnosis, how to treat it. So Dr. Duke, did we cover everything? Is there anything else that you can think of that we left out?
No, but you know me, I'm an open book. If you think of something, we'll talk about it.
I think I've gotten everything checked off I've scratched out everything. I'm a note taker because my memory's not so good. This is my Google for every episode. This is my Google pad. Well, let me ask you, Ginger, is there anything that you think that I forgot or left out?
I don't think so. I think we've covered everything.
Okay, well then it's this time of the show that we have our cancer tip of the week that's generously brought to us by the Puppy Up Foundation. Ginger, what do you have for us this episode?
Today, I wanted to talk about appetite loss. So your dog, there are many, and Dr. Duke, you can jump in. So there could be many reasons that your dog doesn't eat a meal or two, and then they'll just get, maybe an upset stomach. But if that persists, you really need to go to your veterinarian and, possibly have some x-rays done or a ultrasound to make sure there's not anything in there abnormal that might turn out to be cancerous, or it could be a host of many things. But obviously at the Puppy Up Foundation, we concentrate on cancer. So, and that was with one of my dogs. She was eating, but she was just eating at the wrong time of the day. And I thought that was odd. So I took her in and she did have cancer in her stomach. So we had that removed, and 4 years later, she's still doing well. So that's just something, appetite loss is something to pay attention to.
Yeah, cachexia. I've had experience with that. I'm sure a lot of pet parents that have been through cancer have had experience with it. So if your dog has rapid weight loss, please take them in ASAP, because you're always behind with cachexia, and when you get too far behind, you just can't catch up. So it is a critical thing. That's a wonderful cancer tip. I can't believe it just.
You're cutting in and out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're fine now, but just a second ago, you were cutting in and out.
Okay. Well, it's good because we're wrapping things up already. I was just wrapping it up with the little additional note about cachexia. But that's a wonderful cancer tip. Thank you so much, Ginger Morgan, for that this week. Dr. Chris Duke, is there any social media or contact information that you would like to share with our audience?
I can always be contacted through the American Heartworm Society website, through the contact. We also have an info line where I answer emails every day from practitioners and pet owners alike. So if you have a heartworm related situation, or maybe there's been a complication or a difference of opinion between, I get caught in that sometimes. This vet says to do it this way, this vet says to do it that way. Bounce it off of me. I'm happy to talk to you about it. And like I said, you just get to the American Heartworm Society and the contact line, and we can help you in whatever way we can.
What is that website, Dr. Duke? Do you know the website?
Yes, it's AHS, heartwormsociety.org is what it is. But if you just Google or put in Yahoo, American Heartworm Society, it leads you right to us and gives you all the connection tabs. And by the way, all our research information, our life cycle charts, the incidence map that you showed, I mean, the life cycle video is fantastic. That's all for free. So if you get on our website, I encourage you to just take a test drive and go through all those tabs.
Absolutely. You also have Heartworms 101 on there. I didn't have a chance to listen to that, but I certainly intend on it. And I will also link to that in our show notes. Well, you've been wonderfully informative and educational. And I thank you so much, Dr. Duke, for taking your time out to educate our audience about heartworms.
My pleasure. This has been fun.
All right, then. Thank you, our audience, for tuning in this episode. Puppy up. Talk soon.